What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Mixed Marvel Arts. My channel is devoted to making videos about my two favorite topics, mixed martial arts and comic books. In this video, I'll be talking about Amazing Spider-Man #1, the very first issue of his own series. Although his first appearance was actually in Amazing Fantasy #15, which I've already reviewed. I put the link to that video on the top of your screen, so if you haven't seen it yet, go ahead and watch that video, then come back to this one. I highly recommend watching because it's one of the best comics ever. As for this video, it's part of my series where I review as many Spider-Man comics as I can, and we're going to see some more Spider-Man action in this video. But before getting into it, I wanted to show my own copy of this issue for all the comic collectors watching. Although it is a reprint, I met Stan Lee at Comic-Con and he actually signed the front cover. I'm pretty happy to have gotten a comic signed by Stan Lee because he is an absolute legend. So do you have any comics in your collection that stand out from the others? Let me know in the comments section below. This issue opens up with a cool shot of people pointing at Spider-Man and insulting him. The most notable person in the crowd is J Jonah Jameson, of course, who makes his first appearance ever in this issue. Then we get a brief recap of the events from Amazing Fantasy #15, where we see Peter's anger stemming from these recent events. His life has dramatically changed because he now only lives with his Aunt May, and since they're on their own, they're struggling to make their rent payments. We actually see one of the most interesting concepts in a Spider-Man comic ever, as Peter considers using his new powers to become a thief himself. He figures that nobody can stop him anyway. This is a side of Peter that we rarely see, and it's really cool that it gets explored in this first issue. But he decides that he'll perform as Spider-Man and make money that way instead, because Aunt May would be heartbroken if she ever found out Peter was a criminal. So Peter does his performance and tells the showrunner to write his check out to Spider-Man, because Peter doesn't want to reveal his true identity, of course. And then we see this absolutely hilarious scene where Spider-Man walks into a bank to cash his check and struggles to convince the bank teller that he's the real Spider-Man. And it's quite reminiscent of Spider-Man 2, where he stands in an elevator with his suit on and makes casual conversation with a normal guy. But as you can see on screen right now, J Jonah Jameson appears for the first time and writes an editorial that claims Spider-Man is a criminal. When Peter sees the newspaper the next day, he's shocked and confused as to why this is happening to him, when other superheroes are adored by the public. And to make matters worse, Peter can't work as Spider-Man anymore because his showrunners don't trust him. It's really cool to see Spider-Man going through all these problems, and I can't help but wonder if we'll see anything like this happen on screen in his movie series. But the next day, Peter attends the rocket launch of John Jameson, who is an astronaut and J. Jonah Jameson's son. We see some funny banter between Peter and another guy who claims that even Spider-Man would think twice before riding in that rocket. But John Jameson loses control of the rocket, and it begins spiraling back down to Earth. You can see the fear in J. Jonah Jameson's face when he hears the news. But luckily for him, Peter saw the whole thing and visits J.J. Jameson as Spider-Man. Then Spider-Man gets the missing capsule from the space team and tells them he'll deliver it to John Jameson. And J. Jonah Jameson still yells at Spider-Man and disregards his wish to help his own son. Spider-Man rushes to a nearby military base where a pilot agrees to help him reach John Jameson's shuttle and save his life. It's pretty cool because this is the first time Spider-Man actually tries saving someone's life. And of all people, it's J. Jonah Jameson's son, who has been spreading false information about him in the news. But Spider-Man reaches the shuttle and attaches the missing capsule, saving John Jameson's life. Peter is pretty excited knowing that the person he's just saved is J. Jonah Jameson's son, and this could lead to improvements in his public image. But he's shocked to see that the next day, J. Jonah Jameson has still continued his onslaught on Spider-Man, despite the fact that he just saved his own son's life. And I'm curious why you guys think J. Jonah Jameson is harassing Spider-Man in the news like this. If you have any ideas, put them in the comments section. This question actually does get explored further in the coming issues, so you'll get to see the answer in my future videos. But back at home, even Aunt May says she is hoping the authorities can capture Spider-Man and throw him in prison. So the problems just keep mounting up for Peter, and he considers becoming a criminal for a second time in this issue. But then we get to dive into a second story in the same comic. And it's pretty cool that Marvel used to put multiple storylines into the same comic book in their early days. This one begins with Peter visiting the Fantastic Four in order to join their team and make some money. He actually makes his way into their headquarters with ease and expects this to impress the Four because of their security system. But when they immediately trap Spider-Man in a cage, a fight breaks out between Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, and we get to see some pretty funny banter between Spider-Man and the Thing. Then the Human Torch joins the fight, and we see the two teenage superheroes meet one another for the very first time. It's really cool to see that the shared universe concept was put into use in Spider-Man's first comic ever. Of course, now we've seen this concept on a much larger scale in the MCU with the Avengers, and hopefully we'll get to see Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four meet up at some point on screen. But then the Fantastic Four reveal that they are a non-profit organization and don't pay salaries, and they accuse Spider-Man of being wanted by the police. So Spider-Man feels disrespected and immediately leaves their base. Just after this, we see the Chameleon stealing top secret information by impersonating other people. Then he contacts Spider-Man and requests a meeting with him, which Spider-Man accepts in the hope of making some money in the process. But the Chameleon actually goes after more top secret documents after this, and impersonates Spider-Man in the process. So when the real Spider-Man arrives at their meeting location, the police see him and try to arrest him. When Spidey realizes that this was a trap, he goes after the Chameleon. He catapults himself through the air and then catches the Chameleon. It's the first time we see Spider-Man going face to face with a real supervillain. But the Chameleon was prepared for this, so he disguises himself as a police officer to make an escape. But Spider-Man still manages to catch him by using his spider sense, and then the Chameleon accuses Spider-Man of being the Chameleon in a Spider-Man disguise again. So Spider-Man rushes out of the building in fear of being chased by the authorities, and the police end up finding the real Chameleon. But Spider-Man is so disappointed in this situation that he doesn't even care what happens to the Chameleon. He can't believe that nobody trusts him despite his heroic actions. And we see him sobbing while running down the street over the situation. He can't even swing home because he ran out of web fluid. Just imagine the people seeing Spider-Man run through the streets though. That must have been a pretty funny sight for them. But that's where the comic ends. I thought it was a great story, and Steve Ditko's art looked amazing as always. The Chameleon's plan was also really original. So I'm going to go ahead and give this comic a perfect 10 out of 10. Like this video and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content like this. And follow me on Twitter if you want to receive updates about my upcoming videos. I've included the link to my Twitter in the video description below. But that's all for now. I'll see you guys in my next video.